Jason stood in the softly lit suite, staring at the half-empty champagne glasses on the table and wondering if anyone had ever survived a wedding night without spilling something. Or, worse, breaking a piece of furniture. Across from him, she smiled, that strange, radiant smile that seemed perfectly human yet impossible in a way that made him blink twice. Her long ears twitched just slightly as if responding to some melody only she could hear, and he found himself staring at them longer than was polite. "You know," he said, raising his glass with a nervous grin, "I always thought the phrase, 'till death do us part,' was dramatic. Now I'm thinking maybe it's more like, 'till the laws of physics decide otherwise.'" She tilted her head and laughed, the sound like wind chimes in zero gravity. "I can assure you, Jason, death is unlikely to intervene tonight. The universe has other plans." Jason tried to smile confidently, but he caught the faint shimmer in her eyes, the way the edges of the room seemed to bend subtly when she laughed. He chalked it up to too many sci-fi movies, and the champagne doing funny things to perspective. "Right," he said. "Other plans, like rearranging the living room while I'm not looking." She only grinned and tapped her long, elegant ears. When he leaned closer to kiss her, the air seemed to thicken, and he realized the reflection in the window didn't match the skyline outside. The stars glimmered in constellations he didn't recognize, patterns that twisted and danced as if teasing him. You did decorate with a cosmic theme?" he asked, pointing awkwardly. She shook her head, amused. "No decorations. That's the view." Jason nearly dropped his glass, heart thumping, while she reached out and caught it with effortless grace, making it float gently back onto the table. "Careful," she said. "I wouldn't want your first night to be ruined by gravity." He laughed nervously, trying to ignore the subtle humming that now pulsed beneath the floor. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. "I mean, wedding night advice usually involves romance and maybe a bit of awkward fumbling, not cosmic anomalies and floating furniture." She leaned back, one long ear flicking, and quipped, "Don't worry. I find your fumbling quite endearing. It's a human trait, I hear." Jason coughed on his champagne, nearly spraying it across the room. "Human trait, right. Glad I could contribute to interstellar anthropology on our first night." She laughed again, a sound that seemed to ripple the air. "You have no idea," she said, "but tonight you'll learn." Suddenly, the lights dimmed in a sequence that resembled Morse code, though he couldn't decipher it. The hum beneath the floor grew louder, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Jason glanced around, whispering, "Is this normal?" She shook her head, reaching toward him. When her fingers brushed his, he felt a warm pulse, and the room seemed to expand, stretching sideways and upward in ways that defied logic. "Normal," she said softly, "is relative, and tonight I plan to introduce you to extraordinary." He swallowed hard, trying to keep his sense of humor intact. "Extraordinary, right. Like me figuring out how to dance on a ceiling or clean the bathroom while floating." She grinned, a playful sparkle in her eyes. "Exactly. I think gravity would enjoy a little vacation." The floor vibrated faintly as a small object, a vase, Jason noted nervously, lifted and spun lazily in midair. "Okay, that's new," he muttered, ducking instinctively. She laughed, her long ears twitching in perfect rhythm to the levitating vase. "Relax," she said. "It's just a demonstration. The house is fine, probably." He exhaled, trying to focus on something familiar. "So, you're saying all this, your abilities, the floating, the stars outside, is something you can control?" She nodded, sipping champagne, the glass tilting effortlessly without spilling. "Mostly. Some things are automatic. Like your reaction when you see me floating the furniture, that is entirely human." Jason groaned. "Great, so I'm part of the experiment. Wonderful." She leaned closer, eyes sparkling mischievously. "You're also part of the fun." He laughed despite himself, because there was something intoxicating about being both terrified and enchanted. The lights flickered again, and the ceiling seemed to ripple as if a gentle breeze was passing through it. He blinked and noticed the stars outside forming a new pattern, spiraling in a way that reminded him of a galaxy he had only seen in textbooks. "Wait," he said, voice shaky but amused. "Are those moving constellations?" She nodded, reaching out and letting the tips of her long ears brush his shoulder. "They're welcoming you, or teasing you. Hard to tell. Cosmic humor is subtle." Jason groaned and sank into the nearest chair, which promptly rose a few inches off the floor, forcing him to grab the armrest to stay seated. "Subtle," he muttered, "right." By the time the night wore on, Jason realized he was laughing more than panicking, marveling more than worrying. She floated through the room, manipulating lights and objects with gentle gestures. her long ears flicking like antennae for amusement. Every time he tried to explain his fear or confusion, she countered with humor, gently teasing him about human customs, like the way he tried to toast her with his hands slightly shaking, or how he worried about spilling champagne on the carpet. The tension, which could have been overwhelming, dissolved in laughter, awkward jokes, and tiny miracles of levitation and light. Jason finally admitted, out loud and to himself, that this wedding night, though completely unlike anything he had imagined, might be the most exhilarating night of his life. And somewhere between floating toasts and playful cosmic nudges, he realized the universe itself had become part of their private joke, and he was already in love with every impossible aspect of her. Jason woke to the faint hum of the apartment vibrating beneath his mattress, a rhythm that reminded him faintly of a heartbeat, or maybe a very polite alien drum circle. His first thought was that he had somehow slept through an earthquake. His second thought, more rational but no less panicked, was that he had married someone who casually bent reality like origami. She was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floating chair in the center of the room, long ears twitching slightly, and sipping what appeared to be a liquid that shimmered with colors he couldn't name. "Good morning," she said, her voice melodic but carrying an undertone that made it sound like the floor beneath him had just acknowledged his presence. "Did you sleep well?" Jason rubbed his eyes and muttered something about sleeping like a human who hadn't yet realized gravity could be optional. "Mostly," he said, "if you don't count waking up in what feels like a minor spatial anomaly." She chuckled, a soft sound that made the air ripple subtly. "Minor? Jason, if that were minor, I'd be bored." He blinked. "Bored by my sleep schedule?" She shook her head, eyes sparkling. "Bored by reality as you know it." Breakfast was an adventure. He poured coffee into a mug that promptly began to levitate, wobbling slightly as if unsure about its newfound freedom. Do I need to?" He gestured helplessly. "Do I need to chase it or something?" She grinned, gently waving her hand so the coffee returned obediently to the mug. "Gravity is negotiable," she said. "It just likes polite requests." Jason tried to laugh but nearly fell over when the toast slid itself onto a plate floating above the table. "Negotiable, huh?" he said, carefully lifting a piece of bread with a fork. "I feel like we need a manual for this." She tapped the rim of her glass with a finger, making it spin in midair, and said, "Manuals are boring. Adventure is far more educational. Besides, you'll learn faster this way." As they ate, she casually mentioned having visited planets where breakfast included singing pastries, and civilizations where humor was considered the most advanced form of communication. Jason raised an eyebrow. "Singing pastries? I think Earth might be behind on the evolutionary scale." She nodded sagely. "Mostly, but you humans have other charming attributes, like awkwardness. That's useful." He nearly choked on his coffee. "Useful? That's your word." She winked, long ears flicking with amusement. "Very useful. In fact, it can save your life, or at least keep things entertaining." After breakfast, she led him to the balcony. He expected a view of the city, but the skyline was gone, replaced by a panorama of swirling stars and nebulae. Planets drifted lazily across the horizon, orbiting suns in colors that made his pupils ache with curiosity. "What is this?" he whispered. She smiled. "Your perspective. The universe is bigger than your apartment. Sometimes it helps to step outside the human version of reality." Jason laughed nervously. "Right, step outside. Maybe I'll step into orbit, no big deal." She nudged him gently. "Careful, humor will only protect you so far." As they stood there, she began to hum softly, and Jason realized the vibrations beneath his feet resonated with the tone of her voice. He stumbled backward. "Okay," he said, "this is new. Does everything you do come with vibrations?" She laughed, long ears twitching in perfect rhythm. "Not everything, just the interesting stuff." Suddenly, a small object, a metallic cube, rose from the balcony railing and hovered near them. She reached out, and it unfolded into a holographic map of nearby star systems, blinking softly with annotations. "I wanted to show you something," she said. "Places I've been, civilizations I've encountered. You might find it educational." Jason leaned closer, peering at the hologram. "Educational is one word for it, overwhelming is another." She chuckled. "That too, but think of it as a cosmic field trip. You're my chaperone." He laughed, nervously scratching his head. "Chaperone? I think that's code for you're about to be outclassed in every way imaginable." She grinned, letting the cube float higher and spin. "You'll survive, probably, and besides, outclassed can be fun. Look at Earth humans, they always make interesting mistakes." Jason couldn't help but smile. Interesting mistakes, huh? That's a diplomatic way of saying we're clumsy. She nodded. Exactly, clumsy but endearing and occasionally useful. The rest of the day passed in a blur of cosmic lessons, each punctuated by humor. She taught him how to manipulate small gravity fields, only to make him chase his own levitating keys across the suite. She showed him holographic archives of civilizations that had existed billions of years before humanity, with commentary on their bizarre attempts at fashion and art. Jason found himself laughing uncontrollably as she demonstrated a species that communicated exclusively through interpretive dance, long ears flopping in perfect imitation. "You see," she said, floating upside down while mimicking the alien dance. "Even the universe has a sense of humor." By nightfall, Jason felt both exhilarated and exhausted. He had learned more about the cosmos in a single day than most humans could in a lifetime, yet her playful teasing and constant humor kept him grounded. As she floated toward him, brushing a glowing strand of hair from her face, he realized that despite the impossibility of everything he was experiencing, he trusted her completely. She reached out, letting her long ears flick gently against his arm, and said, "Tomorrow we'll go further. You'll see what I mean when I say reality is flexible." Jason nodded, smiling, already anticipating the chaos and laughter that awaited them. "Flexible," he muttered. "Right, I guess I'm ready for my crash course in interstellar domesticity." She laughed, and the stars outside shimmered, as if in agreement, promising that life with her would never, ever be ordinary. Jason awoke to the faint pulse of the suite beneath his feet, but this time it didn't make him panic. He had learned to read it like a conversation, subtle vibrations that mirrored her mood and the small whims of the universe around them. She was already in the kitchen, or rather, in the zero-gravity cooking area she had improvised, floating effortlessly as she stirred a pan of something that smelled vaguely like pancakes but shimmered with an unearthly glow. "Morning," she said, long ears flicking as she noticed his sleepy grin. "Coffee." Jason sat on a chair that hovered a few inches off the floor and shook his head. "Nope. Today I think I'll start with cosmic courage." She laughed, a musical ripple that made a spoon in midair spin slowly. "Good choice. You're improving." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Improving in what sense?" She grinned, long ears tilting playfully. "In the sense that you no longer panic when furniture tries to hug you." He groaned. "I still panic a little, but thanks for noticing the reduction." The morning passed with laughter, minor spatial experiments, and a few gentle nudges toward interstellar domesticity. She showed him how to stabilize a tiny gravity bubble, which promptly made his cereal levitate, spin, and then gently land back in the bowl. "Progress," she said. "Yesterday you would have panicked and spilled it everywhere." Jason frowned mock seriously. "You mean there's a right way to have my cereal orbit me?" She winked. "Precisely. You're learning the rhythm of the universe with humor as your guide." By afternoon, they were on the balcony again, overlooking the ever-shifting panorama of stars, planets, and drifting nebulae. Jason had begun to recognize patterns in the cosmic dance, subtle motions that once would have seemed impossible. She handed him a small device, humming faintly with starlight. "This will help you track temporal anomalies," she said. "Mostly harmless, I promise." He clicked it on, and the holographic map of interstellar currents appeared, symbols flickering in rhythm with her hum. He laughed nervously. "Mostly harmless sounds like a perfect description of marriage." She nudged him playfully. "Marriage, yes, temporal anomalies slightly less predictable." They spent the late afternoon reviewing her memories, fragments of distant worlds, civilizations, and adventures that made his head spin. He asked questions, plenty of awkward, fumbling questions, and she answered with patience, humor, and the occasional teasing remark. "So these people, they didn't have coffee?" he asked, incredulous. "No," she said, long ears flicking. "They considered it a primitive stimulant. They survived on luminescent nectar and sarcasm." Jason laughed. "I think I prefer coffee. But I appreciate the sarcasm part." As evening approached, Jason realized how much he had changed. The initial shock, the panic, the frantic attempts to cling to normalcy had melted into a steady rhythm of trust, curiosity, and laughter. He could float a mug without fear, follow a levitating recipe, and even read the subtle pulse of the room when she hummed or her ears twitched. More than that, he had learned to embrace the absurd, the impossible, and the profoundly beautiful chaos of life with someone who was utterly extraordinary. That night they settled together in the suite, leaning against each other as the stars shifted outside, forming patterns that seemed almost intentional. She whispered soft observations about civilizations he couldn't even begin to imagine, and he responded with jokes that made her laugh so her ears twitched in delight. "You know," he said, "I think I get it now. Love isn't just about holding hands or telling the right jokes. It's about laughing at gravity, chaos, and galaxies together." She smiled, brushing a finger along his arm. "Exactly. And occasionally rearranging furniture for fun." Then came a moment of quiet. The room vibrated softly, a gentle reminder that the universe was alive, curious, and in a small way approving of their union. Jason felt a surge of gratitude and awe. He had faced the impossible, been introduced to realities beyond human comprehension, and somehow, through it all, found joy, humor, and love. She leaned close, letting her long ears rest lightly against his shoulder, and whispered, "Jason, you've grown. You're no longer afraid of the unknown." He chuckled softly. "I think I've learned that the unknown is a lot more fun with you around. And maybe a little less terrifying, except for the pancakes." They laughed together as the stars outside shimmered, planets drifting lazily, and nebulae painted impossible patterns across the cosmos. Jason realized the universe was vast, strange, and unpredictable, but with her by his side, it was also intimate, playful, and warm. The floating objects, shifting lights, and whispered cosmic memories didn't intimidate him anymore. They reminded him of how far he had come, how much he had learned, and how deeply he loved the woman whose long ears twitched whenever she found him amusing. As the night deepened, they held hands, gravity no longer an issue, and Jason whispered, "So, tomorrow, do we tackle faster-than-light laundry or interstellar dishwashing?" She laughed, the sound echoing faintly like starlight through space. "Tomorrow we conquer both, but tonight we just enjoy being us." Jason nodded, heart full, laughter mingling with the quiet hum of the universe beneath them. And for the first time, he understood that love wasn't ordinary, reality wasn't fixed, and sometimes the most impossible journeys led to the most complete and beautiful endings. The universe outside shimmered, the lights pulsed gently, and Jason finally closed his eyes, trusting entirely in the extraordinary life he had chosen, and the extraordinary bride he now knew he would follow to the ends of every galaxy.